In this video, we're going to be de-yellowing some old electronic items like these plastic-based video game consoles right here. But we're not going to be doing our usual Retrobright, we're going to be trying something a little different. And that is Vaporbriting. So before we begin, our last Retrobright video was a big success. In that video we proved many internet Einsteins wrong by successfully Retrobriting with standard off-the-shelf 3% hydrogen peroxide. If you missed that video, I'll link it in the description below. If you want to learn about the science behind yellowing plastic, UV rays, catalysts and everything in between, I highly recommend you check it out. It's in the video description below. Now, if you've never heard of retrobriting or vaporbriting, then it's the process of de-yellowing various different types of plastic by using hydrogen peroxide, heat, and UV rays. Typically with retrobriting, we are applying a hydrogen peroxide-based solution to the item itself. This requires the item to be submerged or covered in the solution. Results can vary depending on the solution that's applied. If it's a cream-based hydrogen peroxide solution, then it can create a less than desired marbling effect. There are some instances where submerging your items in a hydrogen peroxide-based solution just isn't ideal. Maybe you have some sensitive components attached to your plastic and they cannot be removed. So let's try a Vaporbrite solution. Now the difference with vaporbriting is that we're using hydrogen peroxide, heat and UV rays, the sun in this instance. Now the item we want to brighten here, like this Super Nintendo here, is going to be inside a transparent container. This could be plastic, glass or any other material, but the point is we want the UV rays to penetrate this sort of greenhouse effect that we're creating here. The hydrogen peroxide we're going to trap inside of here will vaporize, and this is going to be converted into vapor. The item will essentially brighten using the vapor in the air. So hopefully by vaporizing this and creating a Vaporbriting effect, we're going to essentially de-yellow our electronic item right here. Now in this video I'm going to be performing 4 experiments. This isn't a how-to video, it's an experimentation video. If you've ever been curious about vaporbriting, can you vaporbrite something with a standard 3% solution or something a little bit stronger, then this video is for you. It's experimental. So I'm going to be testing it with my electronics so you don't have to. Okay, let's get going. So the very first thing before we get started with these experiments is I'm going to separate the plastic from most of the electronics and the metal as best I can. We don't want to unintentionally damage some of our sensitive components. After that, I'm going to be removing any stickers, any residue, anything we don't want. So if you have a small little stain like that one there, then it's going to create an adverse effect. So we want to remove this as best as possible. For that, I have Goo Gone, which is great for stickers and residue and anything like that. And just to get those last stains out, I have some isopropyl alcohol. I would recommend doing a spot test with this first with the plastic in case your plastic reacts, but don't use anything stronger like nail varnish or nail polish remover. It's going to react with the plastic and you're going to get a really bad effect from that. So something like this will be good enough to remove a lot of these stains and any other marks on our electronic items. If you have similar items like me, I'll link some of these special screwdrivers in the description below. The screws aren't standardized, as well as all the items I'm using in the video as well. So if you need parts and things, then check the video description. Okay, so let's remove the bottom and the circuit board and everything else. So that doesn't look too bad, but if you look at the top here, you can see the underside is also yellowed as well as the top as well. So it's quite interesting that it's not just direct contact with the sun in which that would be yellowed like it is, but you can clearly see heat and other things have a factor in yellowing items as well. The proof is right there. This has never been opened before ever, and you can see a comparison against what it should look like. So yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So what we're going to do here is remove anything metal, maybe this screw here, but as far as that is concerned, there's not really too much going on here. We do maybe have something there like that little logo there that could get damaged in the solution. We can also press this gray area out here if you're ever worried about something reacting with the solution, whether it's submerged or not. So really the choice is yours how far you want to go with removing items. Better safe than sorry, I would say. And you can see it's a pretty good idea we removed that, because there's a lot more yellow hiding underneath. Okay, so everything's been disassembled here. I'm pretty much going to be shoving this in our container. That's all one solid piece now. This panel looks quite yellowed as well, and also the surrounding of the button right there. So they're the three things we're going to be using in our first experiment. So it's quite interesting on this piece here. You can see the extension port there uses a different type of plastic. So that can be kind of our control for this piece. So similar to the Super Nintendo example, you can see this expansion port here on this item. Again, made from a different type of plastic, or this plastic has additives in it to prevent oxidation. So you can see this can be our control here, and this is the color we're going to try and get this in our experiment. Now our first experiment here, we're going to be de-yellowing this Super Nintendo here. For the first experiment, I'm going to use a standard off-the-shelf 3% hydrogen peroxide solution. Now if you watch the first video, as this is just exposed to the elements here, it's going to give off heat as it's broken down into oxygen and water. It's a highly volatile solution. So even with the outside sun and the outside temperature, we're going to lock this in here, creating sort of like a greenhouse effect, but this will also be giving off heat as well. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to pour this solution into this tray here, and I'm going to trap on this drawer that I got from a chest of drawers. It's going to look something like that once it's all set up. I have the pieces on clear pieces of various things. This is from a paint can, that's from a mini Tupperware, and there's a bigger Tupperware there from a Chinese takeout there, and all the solution is going to be in this tray. Now you can use a fish tank, which is glass, which admittedly would be a lot better, but I want to use components that you may have lying around in your house, like a drawer for example, or a Tupperware, just to see if the reaction works with everyday tools people may have. Another thing you may have is a microwave steamer. These are pretty cool because all the solution will get locked under these holes. You don't need to elevate it with Tupperware. And once you're done, you can put on the top of the steamer. I think that would work really well if you have small pieces to put in there. So there are a lot of options to choose from with regards to creating your own greenhouse effect, but this is what I'm going with here. Just a nice little tray there, or Tupperware, and we're sealing it in with this drawer. I don't think it has to be an airtight seal, but something to trap in the heat that gives off from this reacting. And the UV rays from the sun are gonna go through there. Maybe not as good as glass, but I believe it will work. So, is it hard to get 3% hydrogen peroxide solution in this country? Well, fear not, because experiment number 2, we're going to be doing a different Super Nintendo, this time the underside, with a 12% solution right here. Now, I'm using a glove for this. I don't really want to get it on my skin, although it's probably not the end of the world. I can wash it right off. So, will this work with a 12% solution? Will it work faster? Who knows? Let's find out. Now this is a 12% solution. You typically find something like this in hair dye products and things like that. We'll come to those differences momentarily, but will this de-yellow the item faster than our 3% solution? We'll be monitoring these experiments over time to see how quick they work. And when you typically use a product like this, you would put this over the product, so you're applying it to the product and then sealing it inside like a clear Ziploc container. A lot of criticisms from using a product like this is that it leaves unwanted marbling. It's not like a nice smooth surface. So we're going to see if there's any marbling with this. We're going to see if there's any problems with this. So this is why this is experiment number 2. Okay, so experiment number 3. In experiment number 3, we're going to be using hydrogen peroxide, which you will find in a package of hair dye, for example, something like that. It's a 12% hydrogen peroxide solution. But wait, what's the difference between experiment number 2 and experiment number 3? This also uses a 12% hydrogen peroxide based solution. Well, hydrogen peroxide that you tend to find in hair packages contain additional additives, fragrances, conditioners. It creates this horrible milky effect depending on what product you buy. Now, if we're Vaporbriting an item here where it's locked inside a plastic, will these conditioners affect our item? Some people only have access to these products in certain countries and areas. So it would be good to know, can we use something like this with additives and conditioners, and will it ruin our item? That's what we're going to find out in experiment number 3. Now, products like this you can dilute down, especially if we find that experiment number 1 works absolutely fine. We can dilute this down into a 3% solution, and then we're not going to have all this problem trying to shake it out. So that is something to note as well. So even this says blonde here. This is not the color bottle. This is the hydrogen peroxide based solution. I just thought I'd clear that up. I threw the color away. Because not all these are made differently, they don't always list the ingredients on here, although this one does have ingredients, which could be important to note. So there it is right there. I'm also adding a second one from a totally different brand here, so we have the best chance of finding some of these additives and conditioners. You can see this one doesn't seem to contain ingredients. I'm going to be adding those both, and that way we have a nice chance. You see the consistency is different already, so we have a good chance of experiencing some of those additives and conditioners to see if it ruins our Sega Dreamcast there. Okay, so we have all 3 experiments set up right here. In the middle we have the standard 3% hydrogen peroxide solution. Over on the right here we have our 12%. And on the left here we have our 12%, which comes from a hair dye product that will probably have additional fragrances and conditioners and things. So this is where we're at now. I've waited 30 minutes until the sun comes out. We're going to do a quick temperature check here. I don't have a little thermometer, I only have a gun. And because these guns don't penetrate surfaces like plastic and glass and things, we can't get an accurate reading off the top. So I'm going to do a little lift up. We're going to see a temperature reading, and then we're going to start the timer and see how long these take. Will it work even? I don't know. It's an experiment. Let's find out. Okay, so right now it's 7 degrees. I'll put all the dinosaur units below so you can see the Fahrenheit there. It's 7 degrees. Now the outside of this plastic here is 19.6 degrees, but just to prove a point about temperature guns, we can see on the inside of our container we're almost at 30 degrees. So you can see there's almost a 10-degree difference just by having a peek inside our container right here. So 7 degrees outside, 30 degrees inside. I'm sure we're going to get some sort of reaction. We can see the inside of these plastic containers starting to sort of fog up here from our solution. The H₂O₂, the hydrogen peroxide, is slowly working, giving off some heat, creating a greenhouse effect in this almost sealed container. So let's see what happens. I'm going to come back in a few hours and see how these look. Right now it's been 30 minutes, nothing has really happened, so we're going to check back again very soon. So after only 1 hour now, the temperature has gone from 7 to 17 degrees Celsius. Coming over here, there's some interesting things going on. The 3% hydrogen peroxide solution, it's not sweating, it looks pretty chill inside. It's 35 degrees inside right now. Coming over to this one, the non-hair product 12% solution, it's sweating a lot, there's some condensation, it's 40 degrees on the inside. And coming over to the hair product as well, no surprise, it's the same temperature as the non-hair product, the 12% solution, 40 degrees on the inside. So you can see with the additional difference in the strength of hydrogen peroxide from 3% to 12%, there's a 5-degree difference based on a temperature, an air temperature of 17 degrees. So it is quite interesting. I think we will see a better reaction based on these two. But is it possible to actually Retrobright or Vaporbrite with 3% hydrogen peroxide solution? This is the experiment. Let's find out. But that is after only 1 hour. As for the yellowing, we're not really going to see much change after just 1 hour, but let's see how it goes. Okay, so 4 hours have passed. We've had all these 3 experiments running for 4 hours now. We're going to do some sort of tests, color tests against the control for one of these, just to see if it's de-yellowing at all after 4 hours in 17-degree weather. The weather hasn't really changed now, it's pretty much stuck at that. So we're going to have a look at this one. This is the hair product one right here. The temperature here right now is 30 degrees inside. Direct sunlight actually makes quite a big difference, a 10-degree difference, which is quite interesting. So here's the control. I don't know if you can see that very well. It doesn't look like much has happened, although there does seem to be a little difference. If we look at the side, that was the sort of worst suspect. Let's get a little foot on there. You can see it is quite yellowed on the side. There is a marginal improvement there, but we're going to stick that back in and keep it going. Oh, look at that, the sun's just poked out again. So let's look at the standard 3% H₂O₂ solution. It's actually started sweating a bit now. It took a little time for that to happen. So we remove the cover. Right now it's sitting 30 degrees inside, pretty much the same as that one, oddly. If we look at some of the items here, just make sure, because the sun's moving, they seem to cast shadows, so it's probably important that that doesn't happen. If we grab a control here, you can actually see it is still quite yellowed in there. So it looks like our retrobrighting solution we did before in 3% H₂O₂. We had a really good reaction after around this time. So that's not to say vaporbrighting doesn't work, but certainly it's a lot slower than submerging the item. And like I say at the start of the video, sometimes you may not be able to submerge your items. So let's see how it rides out anyway. We're going to come back in a few hours and go from there. So let's take a look at the third experiment now. That was using a 12% solution. I did go a bit crazy with this one. There's a lot more product in there, so it's going to give off a lot more heat. The temperature gun gives us 40 degrees. Wow. If we look at our control here, you can see we're still quite a ways off. It's not too dissimilar from our 3% experiment over there. After 4 hours, we do have a ways to go. Okay, I'll check back in momentarily. Okay, so after a 7-hour Vaporbrite process in 17 to 18 degree weather, not the best weather, but the thing is I want to do these experiments in the average circumstances. I don't want to do this in 46 degree heat and you can't replicate that at home. I don't want to use professional UV equipment, you don't have that at home. This is the reason we're using these tools and things today. So let's take a look at the hair dye experiment. Now, the hair dye H₂O₂ solution, the point of this experiment was to see if the additional fragrances and conditioners messed up the plastic. So if we take a look at this, let's disregard the yellow for now. You can see there's no marbling, no weird stuff going on as a result of those additives in there. It's a 12% H₂O₂ solution. So, you know, it looks pretty good. I wouldn't say in terms of the yellowing it was much of a success. Let's take a look at our control here. So this is the extension adapter. You can see it is definitely nowhere near this. The Vaporbrite process does take a lot longer than submerging it in a hydrogen peroxide based solution, but if you do have sensitive objects, maybe it is for you. It does depend. For something like this, I don't really recommend it, but again, you know, let's continue with this. So this is the Super Nintendo here. This is the 3% basic H₂O₂ solution. Here's our control. You can see it is very far off the original colors right here. Not looking too great. We got up to 40 degrees on this one, and I think we had a high of 35, 36 on this one, so it did have a good temperature here. The little extra piece there does look a lot less yellow than that. The button trim there does still look quite yellowed there. It doesn't look like much of its success, but let's have a look at the underside here. You can see the underside is a lot yellowed than the other one, and before I put that in there, they were pretty much the same color. So it has taken it down a couple shades, give or take. Now let's look at the last one here. Now this is the 12% H₂O₂ solution. We went kind of crazy with the solution here. You can see even though the sun's gone down, it's fogged up nicely. Our sort of greenhouse effect was working very well there. This doesn't look too bad. If we compare it against the 3% solution, you can see there is a clear difference in shades there. If we compare against our control, you can see it is still a long way off there, but there is significant improvement there. If we turn it over, you can see it's a long way off our control, and underneath it looks quite similar to our 3% solution here. So for whatever reason, it looks like with direct exposure from the sun, the UV, you can see it does make a substantial difference on the top of the object. We seem to be getting lighter shades on the bottom. It is an experiment. It is something to note. If we look at this panel here, again, it's going to be quite similar here. We compare against our control. It is almost there, actually. It is not too bad at all. It's quite interesting. The smaller pieces are quite more successful than the larger pieces. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to put these in the shed over there overnight, just chilling. The thing with H₂O₂, it breaks down if you watched our first video. So tomorrow it will still work. I have done a Retrobright process before, and you can reuse this solution to an extent. So tomorrow it's going to work. Maybe it won't work as well, but as I have everything set up, we're going to do another day on this and see where we are at the end of the video. Okay, welcome to day number 2. We're just waiting for the sun to come out. Let's see if there's anything happened over the last 14 hours in here. So after all 3 experiments sitting for 14 hours in the shed overnight, there's going to be no UV in there. There's not really going to be any heat. So we're pretty much left with the H₂O₂ solution, which as expected didn't really make any progression in the de-yellowing of these items right here, which is to be expected. But this one right here is showing a lot of promise. This is the, you know, the 12% H₂O₂ solution, quite a lot of it. We can see the little buttons around here is almost level with our control. It's almost there. So let's see what today brings and see if there's any improvements, see if there's any reaction to be had left with our H₂O₂, which has been sitting overnight. That will be interesting to find out as well. So let's get going with day 2. Okay, so we're 5 hours in on day 2 right now. I admit the Vaporbrite process is looking like a much slower process than the Retrobright process, but it does work. So you can see it's not quite at the control there. It's a little yellow tinge. You might not notice if the control was missing. The front panel here certainly looks very good. It almost looks like the control, to be honest. Let's just take that off and place it on there. Maybe we can see a little better. It's very good there on that smaller piece. Again with the button as well. You could almost say those 2 pieces are done right now. That's the 12% solution there we dropped in. Similarly, moving over to the 12% hair dye solution, there's a lot less of it in there, but the purpose of this was to look at the conditioners to see if they affect the item. There's no conditioner on here. There's no, residue or anything like that. This was the piece we were looking at mainly. That was where we had half yellow, half white on the side there. It was pretty bad. If we look at the control, you can see it's nothing really like the control. It is like a tinge there, but we did have a really big, definite line going down there. And now it looks very blended and nice. And again, the item is not wet at all. It hasn't been submerged or anything like that. So really, the Vaporbrite process is a battle of time. How long do you want to wait for your item to get back to its color? But it does work. It does seem to work. But that being said, do you need a 12% solution, or will a 3% solution suffice? Let's take a look. Now this one, certainly it's a lot more yellow here. If we look at our control here, you can see quite a notable difference there. That being said, it has taken a couple of shades off. If we look at the panels on the front here, these smaller panels do react a lot quicker than the bigger item. You can see it is a shade or two different there, but it has become a lot brighter. If we compare this to our other one right here, you can see there's not too much difference. I'd say it is slightly more yellowed on the 3%, which is to be expected. So now we're in 5 hours on the second day. The H₂O₂, the hydrogen peroxide, is still reacting. It is still giving off heat. So I think what I'm going to do now, I know it works. I know it takes a lot longer than retrobriting, but how long will it take until this stops reacting? Because we know hydrogen peroxide breaks down in the presence of light and heat. This is why it's stored in brown bottles, or at least not transparent bottles anyway. So if you have bad weather, if you live in a country with no sun, how long can you realistically run this experiment for? 1 day, 2 days? Well, we're on day 2 right now, but 5 days, 7 days. When will this stop reacting? If you have all the time in the world, how long can we leave this running? So what I'm going to do now at the end of day 2, I'm going to take the items back into the shed overnight, bring them out in the day, at the end of day 3, and repeat the process. I'm going to see if we can get these back to their factory state. I think these two are very close to 12% solutions. And will this 3% solution die out before we can actually get a result? This is what we're here to test, and we're testing against average temperatures. It's 17 degrees again today. How long is this going to take, and will it work, especially for the 3% solution there? Okay, so this is day number 3 now. We're 5 hours in. It's quite an overcast day today. If we look at the typical weather here, we're sitting at around 9.5 degrees, something like that. I've just flipped this lid off before I started filming. It's pretty much giving a couple degrees extra, so not really too much going on today, so I imagine the reaction is going to be a lot slower. If we look at this against our control, you can see it's actually almost there. You can see like a yellow kind of tinge there, but we're almost at our control. It's quite amazing, really. The Vaporbrite process is slow, but it does look pretty good. Now the side was the worst. You can see it's definitely a little yellow against our control, but you can see we're almost there, and that's just with some hair products. Absolutely amazing, isn't it? And even if it rains or whatever, then these are pretty much protected from the elements. As long as you regularly wipe these so the UV can penetrate, it's a very easy experiment. You don't need to babysit too much. If we look at this one here, you can see it's not quite there. The front panel and button frame look pretty good, but the main unit, it is a bit yellowed still. But we can leave this here for 1 week, 2 weeks, but it does depend because H₂O₂ does degrade. So how long does that last? Well, we're going to find out. I might run this for 1 week or so and just see how it goes. Now this is our 3% solution. You can see it's almost stopped. Almost the reaction is stopped completely. What I will be talking about at the end of the video is how long does H₂O₂ survive in the air? Does it break down? Are there stabilizers in the solution you buy from the supermarket? It does depend, but we will cover that at the end of the video. But it does look like the 3% one has almost slowed down to a full halt. So this is the report on day 3, and stay tuned for day 4. Will it be better? Who knows? Okay, welcome to day 4. It is another 17-degree day today. Let's take a look. Wow, I would say that is almost there. Look at that. That's amazing. It's quite amazing. After 4 days it is still working. It still hasn't fully broken down. Look at that. Wow, that's amazing. So the Dreamcast is almost there, Let's have a look at the Super Nintendo. Now the 3% solution here, again looking very yellow. I think we're finished with this. You can see it's a few shades off there, but that's more importantly, have a look at the 12% solution here with the Super Nintendo. Now I think this item is harder than the Dreamcast there to sort of restore. You can see it's still a shade away, but it is a lot closer than the 3% solution, isn't it? Look at that, it is almost there. And the panel, it is almost there. Wow, fantastic. And after 4 days, we're still hitting 40 degrees on the inside of these tubs right here. Okay, so day 5 now, day 5 on this process, and the reason this is taking so long is because our 17-degree catalyst is exactly that, 17 degrees, so it does take a long time. But if we look at this Dreamcast now, I think I'm going to call it. I think looking at our control, which was pretty much gleaming white when we started, you can see it is almost new now. And I think this was the case after day 4, to be honest. So day 4 with a bad UV catalyst and heat source, which is the sun here in this terribly cold country. I think we did a very good job with some simple 12% hair product. So I'm going to call this experiment here, I think it was a success. So coming over to the other 12% solution here, even though there's more solution in here, you can see there the difference. You can see it is still slightly yellowed when we compare against our control. Now this might not necessarily mean it's a problem with our H₂O₂ solution there. It could just be the plastic. Even though it's the same type of plastic, it doesn't mean there's the same additives and different things in there. Things are going to react very differently. So while it's not back to its original color there, it is very, very close, and it is not bad for an underside of the product there. I could even leave it in for longer. Perhaps it might brighten even more. If we look at the underside there, you can see that is how it was before. This is how it is afterwards. So it has taken it a couple of shades down there. As for the 3% solution, I think the 3% solution has run its course. This is against the 12% solution. You can see a significant difference there. And this is against the control. You can see a difference there. So there's 3 different shades of Super Nintendo there, but I feel it's come to the point where the 3% solution has just stopped reacting. In terms of stopping reacting, let's talk about that real quick. So talking about the longevity of hydrogen peroxide off-the-shelf solutions, we really don't know what stabilizers have been added in the factory. Therefore, it really depends on the brand how long these products will last. So our last and final experiment is, because we're happy with the Dreamcast here, I think it's pretty good, it's done. I'm going to take the almost failed 3% experiment here. I'm going to put it in this Dreamcast experiment here. What this is going to do is, we've had this hair product in here, the 12% hair product. It's been in here 5 days now. Will there be enough reaction left to de-yellow this Super Nintendo into something more like this, which has already had 5 days to work? Is there any power left in this H₂O₂ solution? Let's find out. Okay, so before we put this back together, I'd recommend washing it off with some soapy water just to get any residue or any condensation or anything off the product. Once you've done that and it's fully dried, I recommend using a UV protectant like this. Now, a lot of videos covering retrobriting and vaporbriting will neglect to mention a product like this. We're basically de-yellowing these items. If we don't use a UV protectant like 303, for example, then this yellow is going to come straight back almost immediately. So this is why this step is very important. Now I'm going to show you the best way to apply a protectant such as this one. Okay, so once the product is clean and completely dry, we can apply the UV protectant. Apply it on quite liberally, all the way around. And then get a microfiber towel and wipe it completely dry. So in terms of UV protection, that is pretty much it. We spray it on dry, it just takes 1 minute. Every couple of months or something, reapply, because it's something you need to keep reapplying, and then it's going to prevent further oxidation. Now this product works on all different types of surfaces, especially on the dash in your car. It works on rubber, wicker, all different things. It's used in the aerospace industry. It's a very good product, and I recommend it for not only using on items such as these, but also on your car and on other outdoor pieces of furniture and various things like that as well. So now the product's assembled back together, you can see the contrasting difference there. It looks absolutely amazing. It's matched up to our control there, and it looks like the front and bottom are way more yellow than the top this time, so they might have to go in next. But yeah, absolutely amazing results there. So before I wrap up the video, I'm going to check out the longevity of the H₂O₂ solutions. I've put the 3% experiment into the Dreamcast one there. That's the hair product, 12%, to see if it still has any life left. And I'm going to continue to monitor the 12% solution to see if this item will become less yellowed. Okay, so we're back a whole week later now. I went away for a week, so I just left these going and see how it would go. I'll spare you from the day-to-day, very slow updates. After all, we don't even know if these are going to do anything. So let's go back to our original 12% experiment there. You can see, here's the border of the original control. You can see it's pretty much spot on. This has never been exposed to any sun. It's straight from the factory because we have a bit of plastic on top of here naturally. But you can see how close that is. And even everything looks very, very good, doesn't it? So it does work. And if we look at our experiment, the 3% H₂O₂, if we look at the side of the control, it's almost there. It's not quite fully restored. Perhaps there's not much power left in this 12% here, but it's nothing that another small 12% bottle might not fix from your average box of hair dye. Okay, so what did we learn from all of these experiments in this video? Number 1, Vaporbrite works. Vaporbriting works. Number 2, Vaporbriting is a slower process, but it doesn't require submerging your items, so it's beneficial for delicate items. The benefits of it being slower are you can check on your item periodically and pull them out when you think they're done. It's harder to leave items in for too long. Number 3, hair conditioners and additives in 12% H₂O₂ solutions in typical hair dye products don't affect the product when vaporbriting because we're not submerging the item in this solution. So if you only have hydrogen peroxide from a packet of hair dye available to you, then it's going to work just fine. Don't worry about it. You don't need to try and source out the proper stuff without the conditioners and additives. Number 4, high percentage hydrogen peroxide. If you can get a hold of it, so more than 12%, as it won't come into direct contact with your item, you can kind of up the H₂O₂ strength in this experiment. You don't have to really worry about your item so much as it's not being submerged in the solution. Perhaps you can go up to 20% and beyond. You cannot do this with a typical submerging with a retrobriting process. Number 5, retrobriting. It still works in 17-degree weather, so 62° Fahrenheit. It's slower, but it is possible. Obviously, if you have more heat, too much heat, you may be risking damage to your item, maybe warping or flexing, but perfectly works fine in 17-degree or 62° Fahrenheit weather. Number 6, vaporbriting isn't reserved for people with specialist UV lights and expensive equipment. It works with everyday pieces of equipment like these metallic bubble wrap containers and some lunch boxes. Anyone can do this at home, we've proved that. Number 7, while 3% hydrogen peroxide works great with retrobriting, so submerging the item in the solution, it doesn't really work very well with a Vaporbrite process. That being said, if you have a bigger UV source, so maybe you have 40-degree weather, 115-degree Fahrenheit weather or above, your catalyst is gonna be stronger, so you may get a better solution before the 3% burns out and pretty much you have no reaction left. So if using 3%, you need more heat, more UV, or both. We don't really have this, but we sort of proved it cannot really be done successfully in 17-degree weather. If I forgot to mention anything else we learned, I'll put them here now so you can see. So how can we improve on these experiments? Well, maybe use a glass container, not a plastic drawer, reasonable to say. Maybe use hotter weather or a hotter heat source or more UV. Stronger H₂O₂, maybe a greenhouse so you can easily set up a mass production rig or something like that. Maybe spend a lot of money on equipment, UV lamps and different things. But the options for improvement are essentially endless. But the point of this video is for experimentation purposes and using items the average person may have laying around their house. So in that respect, it was quite successful. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and more coming soon. Take care. I just want to say a real quick message to our viewers. I made this channel a few years ago, and its primary aim was to give you the skills, but more importantly the confidence in order to tackle pretty much any DIY job you may have. In the process, we've saved our viewers thousands of dollars or pounds or euros, whichever currency you want to use. I've put multiple hours of time into making videos each and every week, which I somehow juggle between family and a full-time job. If any of our videos on our channel helped you, please support our channel by clicking the thanks button underneath any video on this channel. You can choose how much you wish to donate. It's going to go right back into the channel towards videos, tools and everything else. So thank you very much for that.